we see here that the border between Egypt and Israel is just the only thing that's holding people back from going to Egypt to Israel is just a wall. It's just a fenced gate. You don't need a ship to go from Egypt into Israel or from Israel into Egypt. So when Deuteronomy 28:68 talks about being taken away by way of ships into Egypt, it's not talking about Egypt like going back to Egypt again, because you don't need a ship to go to Egypt. You can walk right across from Israel to Egypt, and you can go vice versa, like they did with Joseph and his brothers. So the second Egypt is talking about a land of bondage. Land of bondage is anywhere that the slaves, the Hebrew Israelites, were taken to. On what? On ships. In 2007, the Human Rights Watch, they reported that 33 immigrants, African immigrants into Israel, were killed. 139 were returned back to Africa. In 2007, the Egyptian-Israeli border used to be barbed wire, but it's not anymore. Now, this guy right here, Adam Bashar, pictured at the Egypt-Israel border, he crossed over this border for refuge when he escaped Darfur in the politics of Sudan. In Israel, they are treated like criminals. They are held in detention centers. They often don't have good jobs, or they don't have no jobs at all, and they are in need of help. And here you see the signs of the Africans and the people from Eritrea and Ethiopia and different African states are saying, we don't belong in prison. We're not criminals, because that's where they put them at when they go to Israel. As you can see here in this picture, the Israeli authorities are checking the papers of the Africans here in Israel, and they're getting rid of them. Now, this is all a part of a no blacks in Israel policy. Now, Israel passed a law recently, well, not recently, within the last probably 5 to 10 years, agreeing to pay African asylum seekers $3,500 up to $5,000 to leave Israel. The money came along with a one-way ticket, in which the ticket would take you on an airplane to African state. So any African immigrant who agreed to leave the country voluntarily and promised not to return would get the money and would get the one-way ticket. And back then they had only offered $1,500, but they've stepped up the price because they are seeing that the face of Israel is starting to change. But of course on TV they don't show us the wide population of Africans in Israel. Of course, Barack Obama is welcome in Israel at the Wailing Wall, and here you see Obama with his the hat that the Jews wear. And Bobby Brown was allowed to Israel. He's a celebrity like Obama, so they get to have they get to go over there. If any black person wanted to just go to Israel, they can't do it. You just can't just get a plane ticket to go to Israel. If you are a Jew in America, you can get a plane ticket and go to Israel. I mean, it's that easy. Here you see blacks across the gate being held up once they cross the Israeli border. Here we see another black with his luggage being escorted out of Israel by Israeli police authorities. Here you see the picture of the long fence that is keeping Africans out of Israel by way of Egypt. Africans like the Jews of Nigeria, they did a film a couple years back, re-emerging the Jews of Nigeria. They had a documentary about their Hebrew heritage or Jewish heritage, and they still was not allowed entry into Israel as the right to return. This came out on 17th of May. This came out showcased in New York City. Had a big turnout, but of course, it didn't matter. And actually, a Jewish person wrote and directed this film, Jeff Lieberman. All right, so let's just talk a little bit. Give some tidbits about the Talmud, which is the book that Judaism is based off of. More importantly than the Torah. and the Kabbalah. So some of the teachings of the Talmud, a lot of people don't understand some of these teachings that are in the Talmud. And I've happened to read some things in the Talmud. You can easily find it if you do your research online, or you can maybe ask a Jewish person, can I see your Talmud if it's written in English, and read it. So some of the teachings are in different books of the Talmud, and these are all opinions of rabbis that the Jews are supposed to follow. And the names you see right here are different. And so this one says where a Jew should do evil. So it says if a Jew is tempted to do evil, he should go to a city where he is not known and do the evil there. This is real. This is real stuff. A penalty for disobeying the rabbis. Now it says here in the Talmud, whosoever disobeys the rabbis deserves death and will be punished by being boiled in hot excrement in hell. Another thing in the Talmud, in the Sanhedrin, if a heathen or a Gentile, which according to church teaching, black African American church teaching, which is us, if a Gentile hits a Jew, the Gentile must be killed. Sanhedrin, again, a Jew need not to pay a Gentile the wages owed him for work. So it's okay to cheat non-Jews. Now, moving forward, it also says here in the Talmud that all Gentile children are animals, and Gentile girls are in a state of filth from birth, and Gentiles prefer sex with cows. Here we have, here in Sanhedrin 55b, it says that a Jew may marry a 3-year-old girl, specifically 3 years and a day old. Here it says here in the Sanhedrin 54b, a Jew may have sex with a child as long as the child is less than 9 years old. Now I don't know. This is very disturbing, and I've actually had a chance to talk to some Jews about these things, and they usually just put their head down in shame, and they know that it's true. They know that it's in there, but they don't want to talk about it. And this is the basis of their teachings, and you got to wonder, how could you have religion that teaches this? And so here we see in another part of the Talmud, when a grown up man has intercourse with a little girl, it is nothing. Here we have another one where it says a woman who has had intercourse with a beast is eligible to marry a Jewish priest. A woman who has had sex with a demon is also eligible to marry a Jewish priest. Now, I don't know about you folks, but if I've done a lot of research, and I urge you to do your own research too. And if you can see the same thing for yourself, I'm sure this is going to blow your mind. Now, when we also talk about Judaism, it's a thing that they talk about. It's called the Noahide Law. And the Noahide Law, something that the Jews came up with, and it's in accordance with our American courts. It's supposed to have been signed into law. The U.S. presidents and Congress, they helped urge the adoption of the Noahide laws as interpreted by the rabbis. And the Jewish Encyclopedia envisions that the Noahide law regime and laws as a possible world order immediately preceding the universal reign of the Talmud. So one of the main Noahide laws that supposedly was violated was when Jesus said that he was God. And that caused the Pharisees and Sadducees to just go crazy and say that he had committed blasphemy. And under the Talmud's Noahide laws, the worship of Jesus is forbidden under the penalty of death, since the worship of Christ is condemned by Judaism as idolatry. And here we see the Rabbi Arthur Schneider with Pope Benedict. It's 2008. And it's all, a lot of people can look up this if it's true or false, but supposedly a guillotine death was passed, a guillotine death by the Noahide laws was passed by Congress in 1991 and was signed into law, approved March 20th, 1991 by the father of former U.S. President George Bush Jr. And here we see here George Bush Jr. signing something. I don't know if it's signing something into law, and behind him stands a whole bunch of Jewish men. Because as we know, there's a lot of Jews that are in our government running things behind the scenes, and they help dictate what our presidents do, like puppets. Now here's the Noahide laws. It says, number 1, idolatry is forbidden. Man is commanded to believe in one God alone and worship him. Number 2, incestuous and adulterous relations are forbidden as well. Murder is forbidden. Number 4, cursing the name of God is forbidden. Number 5, theft is forbidden. Number 6, eating the flesh of a living animal that's alive is forbidden. And number 7, mankind is commanded to establish courts of justice. Now, the Noahide legislation was written by the Orthodox Jewish organization based in Brooklyn, New York, and they were presented to George Bush Sr. to sign into legislation. All the New World Order folks, Jew and Gentile, hate Christians in America with a passion. And one of the things that's going to happen in the end is there's going to be an attack against Christians. But this we'll talk about later, because Christians in America are the greatest deterrent to the New World Order agenda. And a lot of people already know what the New World Order agenda is. And the Noahide law states that Gentiles or Christians must conform to these Noahide laws, supposedly that were given to God by Noah for Gentiles after the flood. But this is not in the Bible nowhere. And the penalty for breaking 3 of these Noahide laws is capital punishment by beheading. And 2 of those Jewish laws attack fundamental Christian beliefs directly. So already, if you're a Christian, 2 of these laws, you're already broke. The blasphemy against God and idolatry. And Judaism teaches that Christian faith in Jesus violates both of these 2 laws. And so therefore Jesus Christ was ordered to be executed by the Jewish Pharisees for declaring that he was the Son of God. So in addition, we know about talk about the Kabbalah later. And we already talked about the Israeli Star of David, the hexagram. Now, in the Jewish Torah anthology books, volume 1, pages 392 to 393, the details of the origins of the slanderous beliefs that blacks receive punishments and curses from the curse of Canaan, it was all written down in a book. And in this book, it talks about the curse of Canaan, and because of the curse of Canaan, the things that were bestowed upon black people. And it says here in the Torah Anthology, Volume 1, number 1, because he, meaning Ham, looked at his naked father, because we all know that Ham looked at his father who was naked, Noah, and that basically set everything off. So because Ham looked at his naked father, Noah, his eyes became red, always appearing bloodshot, referring to Africans and African Americans. And when they see Africans with the sclera of their eye is red, the white part of the eye, the Torah Anthology book is blaming the curse of Canaan for this. Number 2, because he, meaning Ham, mockingly told his brothers about his father's nakedness or his condition, his lips were made thick and gross like that of a Negro. This is real stuff. So because Ham saw his father naked and told his brothers with his lips, then because of this, his lips were going to be made thick and gross like a Negro. Number 3, because Ham had turned his head to see his father naked, the hair of his head and beard became kinky. So the curse of Canaan also supposedly had to make black people's hair kinky on the head and the beard. Now, because also, number 4, because he didn't cover his father up, because Ham didn't cover Noah up, it was decreed that him and his descendants will go naked and blackened by the sun. And the last one of these slanderous beliefs of the curse of Canaan, it says here in the Torah anthology Jewish book volume that the last will and testament to Canaan or Canaan was to speak not the truth. So because of this, he was going to be cursed with always lying, holding not yourself aloof from theft, meaning that you're going to go ahead and steal. You're going to be prone to steal, and you're going to lead a dissolute life, meaning a life lacking restraint, given to immoral and improper conduct. This is all supposedly taught in the Jewish Torah anthology about black people and the characteristic physical traits of black people, all stemming to the curse of Canaan, which is just all false teaching. So in Judaism, it says that these Talmudic racist teachings are more important than what the Bible, the Torah says. So it says here in the Sonchino edition, "My son, be more careful in observance of the words of the scribes," meaning the Pharisees and the Sadducees, than in the words of the words of the Old Testament, the Torah. So it's basically saying that, be more in observance to follow the words of the Talmud, which is a collection of opinions from different rabbis, than to actually read and put your basis on the Old Testament. So during slavery, or moving into a different subject, we see the cotton fields. Of course, everybody knows how the slaves were treated on the field and how they were beaten on the post with the bullwhip. Same bullwhip, same whips that Jesus was whipped with, because he supposedly blasphemed, committed blasphemy towards the Noahide laws. We were whipped the same way, and chained in humane practices, as you can see here. Now, it's not because we were a bad people. It's not because of the color of our skin. A lot of people do not understand why we had to go through this, and why we went through the same thing with the Arab slave trade for 1,000 years, but it goes deeper. It goes really, really deep, and all the evidence is in the Bible. And we see another picture here. These are graphic pictures of a noose around a young boy's neck after he's been hanged. And as you can see here, these pictures right here show black people being hanged in front of the camera. As you see right here, this black guy is on the floor, and the Caucasians are all standing, taking a picture of this. And this is actually in Harlem, New York City, on the streets, in the African Jamaican district, where they sell a lot of books, and they have a lot of black pride in Harlem, getting people to wake up and to know their culture and what we've been through and what we're still going through. Now here, supposedly, this is a black guy that supposedly had, I don't know if he had, supposedly was accused of raping a white girl, or doing some kind of sexual act, or maybe trying to talk to a white girl, and because of this, he was shot like 1,000 times by white people, and then he was burnt alive on pieces of wood. As you can see here in this picture right here, very graphic picture, and everybody in the background is standing and watching. And then they also said back in those days, when they would do slave hangings, and they would do lynchings, and when they do practices like this, they would cut the school short so that the kids could come outside and also view the slaves being hung or being beaten or being killed. They wanted to imprint this into the kids' mind that it was okay too. And as you can see the pictures here, they lynched and hanged whole entire families. And we all always talk about the transatlantic slave trade, but we don't talk about the Indian Ocean slave trade or the Arab slave trade that was doing the same exact thing. Now, moving along, we're going to see some of what the ancient Hebrew Israelites, the ancient people of the Bible, the ancient people that lived during biblical times look like. Now we have here the Elamite warriors of the palace of Susa, which is in Iran, Persia. And the Elamites lived in the area of Babylon and near Iran. They were kind of like dwelt in the same area as the Persians and the Medes. And as we see here on the graph, Elam was one of the first sons of Shem, and because Elam was related to Shem, Elam was a Semite, because further down from Elam came Aram, which was the land of the Arameans, which is where the Aramaic language came from, and that is modern day Syria, which was north of Israel and off to the right or to the east. And then we also have Ashur, and we have Lud, and these all came from Semitic branch lines. Here we see here Elam is right here, smack dab, kind of like in the mix with Babylon, Iraq, and Iran. Some more pictures of the Elamites. And they actually have a palace in Iran called the Palace of Susa, Sushan, which is in the book of Daniel. And this is real evidence in the Bible and historical evidence. And the people that were on the walls in the Palace of Susa, the ancient Elamites and the ancient Persians, were black. They were black. They had black skin, black hands, black feet, as you can see on the walls of these palaces. Now, this dates back way over 2,000 years ago. And as you can see, the ancient Persians or the ancient Elamites were black in appearance. So what happened? How did they all change? How did they change to be more European looking with white skin and different color eyes? As we can see here, these are actual pictures on the walls. And these is what the people look like back in those days. So it's interesting that if these people back in those days look black in Iran and Babylon, then I wonder what they look like, the Assyrians look like, and the Canaanites in the area what is now called Lebanon and Jordan look like. These are all ancient pictures. The Hebrews in Assyria. These are pictures of the Hebrews when they were enslaved by the Assyrians. And as you can see here, the Hebrews, their appearance looks to be Negroid with the cornrow / dreadlocks type of hair styles they got going on. Now, King Sennacherib was an Assyrian king, and at his palace in Nineveh, it shows 3 Hebrew prisoners of war playing their lyres while being led away by the Assyrian warriors carrying a club and quiver. This is on an alabaster relief from the palace of Sennacherib in Nineveh. Nineveh is now in northern Iraq. And this is in 7th century BC picture in a British museum right now. And this goes along with the verse in Psalms 137:3 where it says that they carried us away captive, required of us a song. So when they were being led away captive, they required the Hebrew Israelites to play a song. And here it shows them playing a song with their musical instruments. The Assyrian relief portrait of Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III. Now this is all in the Bible. It comes from his ancient capital at Nimrod. And he was Nimrod was the real founder of the Assyrian Empire, but moving along in 745 BC, these guys, Sennacherib and Tiglath-Pileser III and Sargon, they helped to end the northern kingdom of Israel. And it says here in 2 Kings 15:29 that the king of Assyria, King Tiglath-Pileser, he laid siege to the land of Naphtali and carried them away captive into Assyria. And this is his own words. This Assyrian relief right here is over 3,000 years old. Shows the Hebrews in captivity. As you see by the pictures here, the Hebrews have tight, curled, kinky hair, similar to African Americans today, in the hair as well as the beard. And like I was showing you earlier, here we see the picture of the Hebrews up close with their dreadlock, cornrow type hairstyles. and the long beards. And as you can see, their facial appearance looks very similar to people today, black people that have dreadlocks. And here we see Lenny Kravitz with his dreadlocks from the side view with his beard. And you can only imagine that the Hebrew Israelites must have been black. And they were doing these hairstyles that we think that are probably hundreds of years old, but actually thousands of years old. The cornrows and the dreadlocks, just like Samson and the Nazareth vow, and no razor shall touch the hair, and the locks of the hair shall grow. And the locks symbolize the same kind of dreadlocks that African Americans are now wearing today, and they're trying to get back to that natural look with the hair and all types of hairstyles. Now, the dreadlocks, as we know, we are taught are of African and Jamaican origin, but just like the vow to Nazareth, when you don't cut your hair or you don't put a razor to your head, untouched, naturally tight curled hair, which society calls nappy hair, will lock on its own. That's called free forming. Whenever you free form and let your hair grow on its own, it will naturally lock up. And you may have 2 or 3 or 4 big locks of hair that is matted down. If you don't do nothing to it, but just simply go to sleep, wash, wake up, just go about your normal business. No tightening locking gels, no creams, no waxes. The hair will lock up and mat on its own. And this is a feature of African American hair, people of African descent. Just like the way Bob Marley used to have his hair, and some of the Rastas in Jamaica. This is what we call 9 ether hair. You can look it up. Now, this is not compatible or not possible with straight hair. It's only possible with people with woolly hair, the same kind of woolly hair that the Hebrews had, as well as the Egyptians and the Ethiopians and the Libyans and the Canaanites. Now, like I talked about earlier, Cornelius Tacitus, the Roman senator, he said, folks, that many people asserted that the Hebrews were a race of Ethiopian origin. This is in 56 AD. Now, this right here is probably of very strong evidence that the Hebrews could not have been white back in those days if this Roman guy named Cornelius Tacitus in 56 AD said that the Hebrews were a race of Ethiopian origin. So why would this Roman historian who lived over 2,000 years make the statement in his book? If they weren't black, if they were white, why would he say this? But today we observe with our own eyes that the European Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews and the Sephardic Jews are white. We see this. I mean, even the Latino Jews or the Spanish Jews, the Sephardic Jews, who make up about 10 to 15% of the worldwide Jewry, they're not even black. So the only black Jews that they really have acknowledged is the Ethiopian Jews, but that's not the case because we know the majority of the world is made up of people of color. And Ethiopia is just one part of Africa. So there's other Hebrew Israelites that are scattered in Africa, that may not know their heritage, or those that are coming about and starting to find out their heritage and their Hebrewisms, and people in America and South America and the Caribbean also need to find this out too as well. So again, if the skin color didn't matter, then why would the powers to be hide this truth? Obviously, it does matter if you hide it. And when you hide stuff, you're lying. You're trying to suppress the true heritage, skin color of what the real Hebrew Israelites look like. And again, in the scriptures, in Lamentations 5:10, it says, our skin, the Israelites are talking, was black like an oven because of a terrible famine. In Job 30:30, it says, my skin is black upon me, and my bones are burned with heat. So why are the Israelites talking about their skin is black? I mean, they're not putting ashes on their skin. They're not rolling around in the mud and then saying my skin is black. No, they're saying their skin is black because their skin was black. And if it's hot outside, if it's a famine, if it's 90, 100, 110 degree weather, like in Job 30 and Lamentations, the skin is going to get darker. It's going to appear. It's going to be black. Just like what we say today, you got black and you got blacker because you've been in the sun. Even King Solomon, or if it's not King Solomon saying, if it's one of his wives saying, she said the same thing. I am black, but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem. And she says here, look not upon me because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. These are clear evidence that the children of Israel and people that dwelt around the Hebrew Israelites were black as well. So it says here, Jeremiah 14:2, and we've went over this. It says here, Judah mourneth, and the gates therefore languish, and they are black unto the ground, and the cry of Jerusalem was gone up. And again, in Lamentations, we see here the visions, their visages, meaning their faces, are blacker than a coal, and they are not known in the streets. These are all telltale signs and clues as to what color the ancient Hebrew Israelites were back in those days. Now, Muhammad Ali, this is a quote that I ran upon and I really liked. He says here in a quote, in one of his interviews, he says here, we've been brainwashed. Everything good is supposed to be white. We look at Jesus and we see a white with blonde hair and blue eyes. We look at the angels, all the angels, and we see white with blonde hair and blue eyes. Now, I'm sure there's a heaven in the sky, and it's color folk, and its color folk die and go to heaven. But where are the colored angels? They must be in the kitchen preparing milk and honey. We look at Miss America, we see white. We look at Miss World, we see white. We look at Miss Universe, we see white. Even Tarzan, the King of the Jungle, in Black Africa is white. We have white owl cigars, white swan soap, white cloud tissue paper, white rain, hair rinse, white tornado floor wax. All the good cowboys ride the white horses and wear white hats. Angel food cake is the white cake, but the devil's food cake is chocolate. When are we going to wake up as a people and end the lie that white is better than black? Now, looking here at this relief, kind of moving along, you see that the Judean city of Lachish, King Sennacherib of Assyria, is sitting on the throne, and as you can see here, the Hebrew Israelites are in the, they're in the servant position, and they are African Negroid in appearance in terms of their hair texture, the texture of their beards. And here's another picture of them being flayed alive, naked. And if you really look real close, you can see that they're naked. And if you look at the way the hair texture is, and the hair and the beard, you can see that this is not European type of hair texture. Again, some more pictures of the ancient Judean peasants, and some more pictures here we see of the relief of the picture of the Assyrians laying siege to the people of Judah in the town city of Lachish. As you see it down here at the bottom right hand corner, you can see the real good the hair texture, the kinky tight curled hair texture, along with the beard of the ancient Hebrew Israelites. Close-up picture again, the Hebrews. As you can see, the little small circular marks indicate the kinky, tight curled hair. Here we see some pictures that have probably been, a lot of people have not seen, of Jesus Christ and his disciples in a Coptic museum in Cairo, Egypt, and they all are black with short style afros. Here we see some more pictures in a line of the Hebrew Israelites with their tight curled kinky hair and different hairstyles similar to African Americans and black people today. Now, this picture is a real close-up picture showing you a picture of what the Hebrew Israelites look like in the Judean town of Lachish in southern Israel. Now, their city was laid siege and captured around 700 BC under the Assyrian king Sennacherib. And the city of Lachish was assigned to the tribe of Judah in Joshua 15:39, as we talked about earlier. And Lachish was one of the fortress towns protecting any invading approaches to Jerusalem. The Hebrews in Lachish were captured by the Assyrians, as you can see them here with their kinky hair and beards typical of a black person. It's mentioned. If you think that there's no proof in the Bible, it's in the Bible. It's in 2 Kings 18, and it's also in 2 Chronicles chapter 32, and a book of Micah chapter 1 verse 13, and it's also in the annuals of King Sennacherib. He also wrote his own book about the late siege of the city of Lachish, and this relief was actually taken from the Assyrian king's palace in Nineveh, which is now in northern Iraq. And as you can see here, the captivity routes of the Assyrians and how they took the Israelites, they took them out of Israel, and they took them all the way into Assyria. And then during the Babylonian era, they took them into Babylon across the Arabian desert. And of course, some of them probably also escaped before captivity and probably migrated into Arabia and into Egypt and Africa. Closer picture of the Hebrews in Lachish show the definition of their hair texture, as you can see here, coinciding with their beard texture. And as you can compare to Africans, we see here, which are of the Sand tribe, you can see that their hair resembles each other. And we all can see here that, and ask the question, does their hair look European and straight, or does their hair look African, meaning kinky or tight curled hair? You be the judge. So, as I say, if the children of Israel were black back then who are the Jews around us today? Did all the black Jews die out, or did all the black Jews turn white? As we can see here, if we compare the ancient hair textures on the walls of the pictures of the Hebrews to a modern day Caucasian or European, we can see that there's no resemblance. So who are really the descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel? Is it the European Jews, or is it the people of African Negro descent? Remember, dark-skinned Africans also have different variations of nose shapes and hair textures. And even eye colors. Not all Africans in the continent of Africa have wide nose, and there's different variations of skin color, as you can see with Nigerians and other African states, and also hair texture. So you can't accurately tell how wide a person's nose is by looking at them, especially from a side view. Here's some pictures of more Africans with the tight curled African curly hair. Here we see pictures again of Jesus and his disciples, black in appearance with short styled afros, not like the 12 disciples pictures that we see today. And here's the version where they start to try to lighten it up, because the Europeans tend to always want to lighten up the pictures that they find to kind of downplay the blackness in a lot of these archaeological finds that they find all over in Africa, Middle East, and Israel. And here we see a picture that was found in the catacombs in Rome, which are like underground tunnels that Christians used to escape persecution, and they also used to bury people down there. And in these catacombs, they found back in 300 A.D. pictures of Abraham raising his sword to slay his son Isaac, and you can see here that Abraham is not white and Isaac is not white. Here you can see here Samson wrestling the lion, a picture of him, and this is around 400 A.D. and this is found in the catacombs in Rome. And as you can see here, he is not white. He has black skin. You can look at his hands, his feet, and you could tell that even his hairstyles is not of European. And mind you, this is thousands of years old, so you got to think that maybe in its original form that his skin may have actually been darker than what it is now. And here we have Jonah, the prophet Jonah, and the whale, the story of the whale, the sea monster. As you can see, the guys in the boat are not white, they're black. And as you can see right here, you can see the sea monster. Here we have another picture found around 300 BC, 200 AD of Moses and the Hebrews crossing the Red Sea, being pursued by the pharaohs and the Egyptians. And as you can see here, everybody in this picture is black, is people of color. There's no Caucasians here. This is also another picture going on with King David and his musicians. And as you can see, again, everybody's complexion is brown-skinned people with a sort of like an Afro-styled hair. Now this is I found very interesting. This was something by an Italian traveler in 1470 A.D. He lived around 1470 A.D. to 1517 A.D. And this guy, Ludovico di Varthema, also known as Barthema, and Vertomannus, he was an Italian traveler and aristocrat known for being the first non-Muslim European to enter Mecca as a pilgrim. Nearly everything that is known about his life comes from his own account of his travels. And he wrote accounts of his travels in around 1510, published in Rome. And here in this account, I'm gonna read part of it. He says, at the end of 8 days, and this is talking about a mountain that he found concerning that was inhabited by the Jews. And it says here, at the end of the 8 days, we found a mountain which appeared to be 10 or 12 miles in circumference, in which the mountain there, on the mountain there dwelt 4,000 to 5,000 Jews, and they were naked, and in their height they were 5 or 6 spans, and some of them had a feminine voice, and they said that and are more black than any other color. So right here it says that when they went to this mountain, they found about 4,000 to 5,000 Jews. They were naked. They were about 5 to 6 spans in height. They had a slight feminine voice, but they were more black than any other color. And it says here that they lived entirely upon the flesh of sheep, and they ate nothing else. They were circumcised and confessed that they were Jews. And they also talked about the Moors. Maybe they talked about the Moors because maybe Moors were people they didn't like, or maybe it was an enemy, because they talked about wanting to skin the Moors. But it's interesting because right here it talks about this traveler, this Italian traveler, seeing these 4,000 to 5,000 Jews and knowing that they were more black than any other color. And this is a very good sign and proof that the Jews, wherever they may have been scattered, whether it was in Arabia or Africa, they were black. And they note down here at this bottom part that in the part where it says that the Jews there were circumcised and they confessed that they were Jews, and if they could get a Moor into their hands, they would skin him alive. Right here, the Italian traveler states that the use of the word Moor was really in place of Arab. So really, he says that if they could get an Arab into their hands, they would skin him alive. Now, maybe because the Arabs and the Jews were, they were enemies. They had different religions. But this was interesting when I ran across this. So let's talk about the Canaanite people. The Levant people. When Abraham was old, stricken in age, the Lord had blessed him and told him what to do. And before he died, he talked to the oldest servant of his house, and he said, he prayed with him, and he said, I will make thee swear by the Lord, the God of thy heaven and the God of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, amongst whom I dwell. So right here it says Abraham dwelt amongst the black Canaanites of Ham, but they weren't supposed to take up the wives of the Canaanites. And here we see the Canaanites people, the Levant people, with their typical headband around their head. You can see the skin color is black. You can see the hair texture. It's almost as if the Canaanite people, they all had dreadlocks as you look at their hair. But the children of Israel, they continued to intermarry with the black Canaanites in the land, and they told them not to do this. But here it says here, and the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest to Gerar, and to Gaza, which is Palestine, as thou goest unto Sodom and Gomorrah, and Admah, and Zebulun, and even Elisha. The Canaan's first son was Sidon, and it was from the Canaanites that the Phoenicians arrived from, in their major cities, Sidon and Tyre, which is in Lebanon. The Phoenicians also called themselves Canaani or Canaanites. Now, of course, it's called Lebanon, but the Arabs living in Lebanon right now are not descendants of the ancient black Canaanites, and the Phoenicians, because they were black back in those days. So the Levant prisoners, the Canaanites, they're shown also in the tombs in Egypt. General Horemheb in 1319 BC. As you can see, the Canaanites here are also black in appearance, even though some of the color has faded away. Some more pictures right here. These are all found in temples and in the area of Egypt. And you can see the Canaanites often had the headband around their hair, and they were brown skin in appearance. Here we see an Egyptian memorial stone of a mercenary Levantine soldier, Canaanite soldier, drinking beer in the company of his Egyptian wife and child. This is 1350 BC, and as you can see, the Egyptian wife is black, and the Canaanite man, her husband, is black as well, and the child is black too, as you can see. And you can see the Egyptian hieroglyphs above at the top. So the Egyptians were black with woolly hair, and the Canaanites were black with woolly hair. Then we would expect that the Hebrew Israelites should also be black with woolly hair. Why? Because in the Old Testament, it clearly states that the Israelites dwelt among and intermarried with these black nations of Ham. The sons of Ham were in Africa, Arabia, and the Middle East, and they were Libyans, and the Canaanites were in Israel and Palestine, and Mizraim was basically the foundation of Egypt. And Cush was pretty much the rest of Africa, Ethiopia, and Nubia. And the Philistines were offset of Mizraim, or the Egyptians, because they were descendants of the son Casluhim, who was the father of the Philistines in Genesis 10:14. And as you can see here, King David, we all know the story of King David and how he married Bathsheba, or Bathsheba was already married, and he took her to be his wife, and she was a Hittite, and a Hittite was a descendant of Heth, which was one of the sons of Canaan. And also the tribe of Simeon, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, Simeon had a son named Shaul, and he was the son of a Canaanite woman. Here we see evidence of the Israelites and the Canaanites union in Judges 3:5. And it says that the children of Israel dwelt among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now these are all majority descendants of Canaan if you break down the genealogy. And it says here, and they took their daughters to be their wives, and they gave their daughters to their sons, and they served their gods. So they all intermingled, they married, and they had children. In Ezra 9:1-2, it also says the same thing, that the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites didn't separate themselves from the people of the lands, and they did according to their abominations of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites, and the Moabites, even the Egyptians and the Amorites. And they, of course, they took their daughters for themselves and for their sons, so that the holy seed mingled themselves with the people of the lands. Now, they weren't supposed to do this, but they did this anyway. One of Jesus' disciples was a Canaanite. Matthew 10:4 says Simon the Canaanite and Judas Iscariot. Here we see here a picture of a Libyan, a Canaanite, a Syrian, and a Nubian all bowing to the Pharaoh of Egypt. And this is actually in museums, in a museum in Cairo, Egypt. And as you can see here, the Libyan to the far left has brown skin. The Canaanite, as you can see here with the headband around his head, he has a brown skin. And the Syrian right here, everybody in this whole picture, even the Nubian, are people of color. So as you can see, despite the fading or lightening of the color of the wall painting, we can still see that the evidence of all these peoples from Africa and the Middle East were all people of color. Now, we talked about Pharaoh Horemheb before, and he was the last pharaoh of the 18th dynasty around 1300 BC. And as you can see here, the people that he enslaved and the Egyptians were all people of color. The Philistines, again, this is a relief from the Medinet Habu temple, and the Philistines were also black. Now Goliath was a Philistine, fought King David, so the Israelites were fighting against a race or a nation of black people themselves. The Medinet Habu temple, where this was found at, was the mortuary temple of Pharaoh Ramses III. And as you can see here, Mizraim was also the father of the Philistines, by way of 1 Chronicles chapter 1, 11 through 12. Now, even Josephus Flavius writes concerning Mizraim that all the children in Mizraim, being 8 in number, possessed the country from Gaza to Egypt. Gaza was once the area that was basically the area of the Philistines. And he's saying here, ancient Judean Roman historian 2,000 years ago, is that the children of Mizraim, which is Egypt, being 8 in number, they possess the country of Egypt and also part of Israel, which is Gaza, which we now know as the Gaza Strip, which is where the Palestinians are right now. Though it retained the name of only the Philistia, or Philistines, for the Greeks call part of that country Palestine. And part of Judea was changed into the word Palestinia after like 1700 AD. But people from Palestine to this day will often tell you that they are descendants of the Philistines, which is not correct, because if they were, they would still look like the ancient Egyptians. They would be black in appearance, not Arabic in appearance with white skin and straight hair. Some more pictures right here of the Israelites. Picture of right here Moses in the burning bush in 303 BC to 256 AD, and right here you can see he has a small little afro hairstyle going on, and he has black skin. Over here we see Jeremiah or Ezra, I'm not sure, holding and reading a scroll. This is around the same time, 300 BC to 256 AD. This is the original picture. As you can see, the hairstyle is not straight hair. They have kinky woolly hair similar to people of African black descent. Daniel in the Lion's Den. This is in a museum, and this dates back a long time ago. As you can see here, Daniel doesn't have the appearance of a white man; it's the appearance of a black man with a small afro. Here we have a coin of Byzantine Emperor, Roman Emperor Justinian II, and on one side of the coin, as you can see to the right, you see him with his European type hairstyle and his crown, and on the other side you have the picture of Jesus Christ, and you see Jesus Christ has an afro with woolly hair, just like the Bible talks about. Now, why would this guy make a portrait on the coin based on Jesus Christ, who we believed was white? Back here, or right here on this coin, this is obviously not the case. Things got lighter during the Renaissance period, as you can see here with Jesus and his disciples, and so we see him now today as a white man with sometimes a brown hair or blonde hair and blue eyes. Now, Hitler even knew the true heritage of the Hebrews, and There's a book called The Nazis, World War II by Robert Edwin Hertzstein. And as you can see by the last name, Hertzstein, he was also Jewish, or he had some Jewish connections, or simply he was from Europe. Now, in the book, Hitler quotes that the genetic heritage of the Hebrews, or the Jews, whatever name you want to use, was purportedly traced to the Oriental, the Negro, the Near Asian, and Hamitic people. So nowhere in this quote did he say that the genetic heritage of the Hebrews was traced to the Europeans. He says here the Orientals, the Negroes, the Near Asian, and Hamitic people. So Adolf Hitler knew who the real Hebrews were. And as you can see here, the basis for a lot of these names, Ham means burnt black, Ethiop is the Greek root of the word Ethiopia, meaning burnt skin, and Kemet, the ancient name of Egypt, means land of black faces or black land. The false images we see of Christ today, some people may say that there's a picture of Caesar Borgia, which they look very similar when you look at the picture. Even the ancient Sumerians lived in the city of Ur, the same city that the Chaldees or the Chaldeans came from, which back in those days were a black civilization. The Sumerians who lived in the land of Ur, Mesopotamia, they were the precursors to the ancient Semites, and they refer to themselves as the black-headed people. A lot of people don't know this. And as you can see here, different pictures, you see different images of Christ. You see a picture with the Good Shepherd portraying Jesus Christ with the lamb, and he's black in appearance. But then and this is 3rd century. But then you see the Good Shepherd today with the sheep, and he is white. So how is somebody changing from black to white? Already we've went through a little bit of history in regards to black history, and going all the way back into the ancient Hebrew Israelites, and trying to make some kind of a connection to what's going on today, the curses and the things that the ancient Hebrew Israelites went through, parallel what Africans went through, African Americans and all black people that's been scattered by way of slavery over centuries and a millennia. So it seems as though the curses of the Hebrew Israelites and what they went through just continue to move on with Arab slave trade and transatlantic slave trade, and even continue on to the suffering that seems to be going on today in the black communities all across the world. And so we also see a increasing rise in we've seen different rise in different denominations in the Christian religion, like the Seventh-day Adventists and the Mormons and Jehovah's Witness, and different types of denominations like Baptist, Protestant, Methodist, Pentecostal, Apostolic, non-denominational. And then you also see an upcoming emergence of the Hebrew Israelite faith or belief system. And even though this has been documented well, like in the 1700s, by different black men, you see a strong emergence of people starting to do more reading in the Bible and do more research outside of the Bible, and are starting to connect the dots, or at least start to see the similarities between what has went on with the ancient Hebrew Israelites and all the prophecies and curses and things that was foretold in the Bible as it pertains to what black people are going through today. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we see more and more black people starting to wonder, who they really are, what's their heritage, and why are we going through what we're going through. And interesting note, of course we have three major religions. We have the Christianity, we have Islam, and Judaism. If you look around the whole spectrum of the world, in terms of religion, you will see predominantly a lot of people in Europe. Of course, the Catholic Church is, based out of there. So you see a lot of people, a lot of Caucasians that are Catholic. And if you look at the other side of the globe, Asia, Asia Minor, you'll see that the predominant faiths are Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. And you go over to America, you see the majority of African Americans are Christian. And even in the Caribbeans, West Indies, Lesser Indies, you will see a lot of people of black descent that are Christian as well. And you will see in parts of Africa, almost like a 50-50 split. You will see that Africans are either Christian or Muslim, and if they're Muslim, they're most likely living in the northern states of Africa. But it's kind of interesting that when we talk about the Bible, and this is just my observation, is that in the Pentecostal Apostolic Church, what you see is going on in America as well as Africa, you see a strong correlation of what God is, pouring out His Spirit on people of black descent, African Americans and Africans, just like it was done back in Acts 2:38, after Jesus died on the cross and sent His Comforter, or the Holy Spirit. But moving forward, back then, when in the Bible, when Jesus came, He came to save and die for everybody's sins, so that we may be saved and have salvation. But of course, we have an evil side too, Satan and his forces, demonic forces, which are trying to destroy God's people, in general, everybody. But he's also trying to destroy God's people, the lost sheep of Israel, as best as he can, and to wipe them off the face of the earth. And it's ironic, well, it's not ironic, but it's interesting that people of color, scattered by way of slavery all across the world, have been suffering for what seems to be centuries and millennia, and it doesn't seem like the suffering is ever going to end. So at this next section, we're going to start to try to tie in how this all plays out in today's time, today's society, where we have multiple religions. We have people hiding behind religions with different agendas that are not benevolent, that are not good, but in fact are evil. And we'll see a lot of cult societies, secret societies, as you may call them, and organizations that are around, that have been around, that are also aiding to the destruction of African Americans, black people, and in a bigger sense, the whole world. And when we look at the media, TV, movies, music, we look at literature with the Bible and history books, we will see that a lot of this has been manipulated for a reason. And the things that we see and we hear, it plays a big factor in our brainwashing or mental programming or conditioning, indoctrination, whatever you may call it. But it's all causing destruction, and it's leading us away from God into an immoral, godless society that we're starting to live in. So, first thing I want to talk about is different occult societies. So, to understand, well, first, if you believe in God, you also got to understand the evil forces that are at take, because the evil force, just like there's good, there's also evil. So you must also understand Satan and his forces if you're going to be able to combat him, or be able to see the signs that you may protect yourself from Satan and these forces that are out here. And so when we look at TV, we see a lot of symbolism, and we see a lot of signs, and a lot of these award shows and these different things that on TV are having more symbols in it more than ever. And some people do not have a clue as to what these symbols mean. And symbols conceal, and they also show things. But you just gotta know what the symbols mean. And so one of the biggest things people are talking about now, with the music industry and movies and everything, is always talking about the Illuminati, and he's talking about Freemasons. They kind of go hand in hand when people start talking about occult societies. And we see, in the African American community, we see, of course, the Masons, the Black Masons, and Prince Hall Masons. But if you go way back in history, the Freemasons was started in Europe. It was started by primarily white people, and their intentions was not to allow black people into the Freemason club. And you had the York Rite and you had the Scottish Rite, Freemasons. And then out of the sect, along with the Jesuits, came the Illuminati. This is all based out of Europe. Black people was not involved in any of this. So right here we see in this picture, moving along, we see the symbol of the Freemasons. And, everybody should be familiar with this if you live in America. And you see, of course, the all-seeing eye, which is on our dollar bill, at the triangle, and the rays of the sun. And you also see the letter G, which supposedly can stand for God or geometry. But, once again, God is a title, and God could be a lot of different things. Back in the days, God could have been Dagon or Horus or Baal or Ishtar or Tammuz, It can be a lot of things. Lucifer, Jesus Christ. It just depends. So, the all-seeing eye. We're starting to see this all-seeing eye on cartoons and movies and music videos, and people are, doing little hand signals, or putting their triangle above their left eye. So why is this eye seen everywhere? And it's in ancient Egyptian religions and Catholic churches and synagogues. It's in movies, music videos. It's in rock music, some clothes, and some satanic symbolism. The Freemasons use it, and it's also seen in the Israeli Supreme Court. Now here we see the picture of the different steps of Freemasonry, and as you can see, there's a York Rite and you have a Scottish Rite. And hard to tell, but most people are probably familiar with the Scottish Rite, which has 32 to 33 degrees of levels that you can get up to become at the highest level. And then with the York Rite, you see it's a different type of approach. But as you get to the top, you will see that you become almost like the ancient Knights Templar or the Knights of Malta. And it's interesting to note that these symbols, if you look at the symbols of the Knights of Malta, a lot of famous political leaders were members of the Knights of Malta. Mussolini and Hitler and the Queen of England and the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and Sammy Davis Jr. and even Nelson Mandela were all members of the Knights of Malta. So it's a huge organization, club. And you can easily research this and see the symbols and signs. And actually, also these symbols also date back to ancient Egypt as well. And then you have your affiliated organizations like the Shriners, the Muslim Shriners, and the Eastern Stars, just to name a few. And as you can see here in this picture, there's no black people. It's black people weren't in these clubs and organizations back in those days. All originated out of Europe. Now here we see different symbols, Freemasons, the checkered floors and the pillars, and once again we see the hexagram, which is supposedly the Star of David, and we talked about where that came from. And we see the Skull and Bones, just like the Skull and Bones group that Bush is in, and John Kerry, which is a secret, so they can't tell you anything about it. Here we see George Washington in his stance, and the stance is identical to the stance of the Baphomet, which is the satanic figure for the Church of Satan. A man named Eliphas Levi came up with this picture, and this picture is always associated with Satanism and evil. And he, as you can see here, he has the goat's head with a pentagram and the black wings and the chest like a woman. Even though he's a man, he's the body of a man, but he has the breast of a woman. And as you can see here, we have the serpent wrapping around the staff, which is used for in the medical field today, ironically. And we see the moon at the bottom and at the top. And they are both in the same stance. And you gotta remember, everybody should notice that a lot of the signers of the Constitutions were Freemasons, and the United States was built on Freemasonry. So the term that you see with the stance is, as it is above, so it is below. And that was made by a man named Eliphas Levi. He was a magician and occultist, and he had a huge impact on the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And we'll talk about that later. And Satanists, Freemasons, and also the famous Satanist, Rosicrucian, and Grandmaster Freemason, Aleister Crowley, who we'll talk about later too. And here we can see here, it's a picture of one of his renditions of the hexagram. A lot of times the hexagram means many things, you know, like fire and water, and man and female. And as you can see, the tau cross, which is the ancient cross symbol that they used back in the day. You can see it back in ancient Egypt. And the pyramids, of course, interlocking triangles. Here we see a ritual area that Freemasons and the Hermetic Order Dawn is resembling. And you can see in the background, you see the hexagram, you can see the triangle, and you can see the cross, and you can see the incense being burnt. And on the pillars, you can see ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. And it's interesting, why are they using ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs in their rituals along with the hexagram superimposed over the cross? So getting back to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, here we see it's a video by Sierra. Anybody can look this up. It's a super turned up video, and here she has on her coat the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And in the video, when most people watch this video, they don't know what this means. They don't know what is the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they probably don't know why she's wearing it, but it's all over her sleeves and her boots and the back of her coat, and she is displaying the coat and the name to people on TV, and that's why she has her back turned towards the camera so everybody can see it. And as you can see in these rituals, they use a lot of things, a lot of devices and props like swords and staffs and circles with the pentagram, with the hexagram in it, and cups. So the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, here you see the symbol like we saw earlier with the pyramid and the cross. And then over to the left, you see the Kabbalah Tree of Life. And the Kabbalah Tree of Life, you can see there's a whole bunch of Jewish Hebrew symbols on there, and we'll explain about that later. So the Kabbalah Tree of Life has a lot of stuff going on. It's really, really complex, but each one of these names you see over here is supposed to be a name of an angel. And it's also associated with the planets. The planets like Mercury and Mars and Venus and Saturn. And there's symbols with each of these points on the tree of life. And at the top part, the crown, you see the word Kether, and you can see there's a symbol. And then you can see over to the left, you see different symbols, and to the right, you see the sun. And so you're probably wondering, what do all these symbols mean? What do all these symbols mean? And it's very confusing, but I'm going to kind of break down what it means. And it's really, really deep when you really can grasp what's going on. So here we see an image of the Kabbalah Tree of Life, and you can see here at the top position, you see Neptune, you see Uranus, Saturn, Pluto, Mars, Jupiter, the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, and Venus. And they all have symbols. Now, ironically, the talisman of Saturn, which was eventually called the Seal of Solomon, which nowadays they use this talisman to invoke demons and invoke spells and do forms of witchcraft and sorcery. So the witches stand on the pentacle and call evil spirits to the hexagram. And as you can see on the hexagram, there's 7 symbols, 6 symbols inside each of the triangles, and then one symbol right above the bull's head, which correlates with Saturn. And Saturn also was correlated with a lot of the pagan gods back in the day, with the Hebrew Israelites and the Egyptians. And if you look very closely, you will see that these symbols, which represents different pagan gods that were being worshipped back in Hebrew Israelites days, in regards to the planetary bodies like the moon and the sun and Saturn and Venus, they all correlate with a pagan god, and they have a symbol to it. And this is the reason why they call it the Seal of Solomon, because Solomon's wives were from different areas of the Middle East and Africa, and they all worshiped their own pagan religions. And he, of course, he was involved in a lot of pagan religions, which is one of the reasons why he strayed away from the Most High. And the Israelites, the house of Israel and Judah, was separated into two kingdoms. Now, if you look at the symbols on the talisman of Saturn, they are exactly the same as the symbols on the Kabbalah Tree of Life. If you look at the symbol for Saturn, it's over there on the left side, over Binah. And if you look at the sun in the middle of the hexagram, it's right there in the middle point of the Kabbalah Tree of Life. And we see the moon right below, and then we see Venus to the right, and Mercury and Jupiter. And this is all in the hexagram. The hexagram was being used way before it was used as the symbol for Israel. It was used in Hinduism and Buddhism. You can find this hexagram everywhere, and it's not associated with good. So planetary idol worship was going on way back, and the Bible was against it. And if you look in 2 Kings 17:16, it says, "And they left all the commandments to the Lord their God, and made them molten images, and even 2 calves, and made a grove," which is similar to the obelisk, and the Washington Monument. That's basically what an obelisk is. And they worship all the hosts of heaven. The host of heaven means the planets, planetary bodies, and they also serve Baal. Deuteronomy 4:19, it says, "And unless thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven," space, "and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars," like the star Sirius, the dark star, and the Orion constellation, "even all the host of heaven should have be driven to worship them and serve them." So right here, in the book of Deuteronomy, God is telling Moses how back then they were worshiping the sun, the moon, and the stars, and all the planetary bodies. They're worshiping them, and including they was worshiping Baal. And you got to remember, back in the book of Enoch, which is in the Ethiopian Coptic Bible, which is not in our Bible, for some reason, it talks about how the fallen angels that came to the earth that produced the Nephilim, they taught man astrology and the worship of the planetary bodies, and amongst other things. This is all in the book of Enoch, which was also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947 in Israel, written in Hebrew. And so in Deuteronomy 17:13, it says again, "And have gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun or moon or any of the hosts of heaven, the planets, which I have not commanded. So back then they were worshiping planetary bodies and the sun and the moon, and they're still doing it today under the cover of Judaism, and of course they're doing it blatantly in Satan occult practices. Now, supposedly the star of Saturn, or talisman, originated around 2500 BC in the city of Ur. The city of Ur was where the ancient Sumerians were from, and also the Chaldeans, the Chaldee, and was also where Abraham dwelt at, which is in southern Mesopotamia. And the ancient astrologers and holy men known in history as Magi first discovered the secrets of the magical talisman of Saturn while researching the cosmic benefits of the planetary magic, which was taught to ancient man by the fallen angels. The ancient Sumerians called them the star gods, or the Anunnaki. And the 6-point star, like we talked about before, was associated with worship of Saturn. And Saturn was also associated with the word Satan. And as we talked about before, Moloch was a pagan god, and Remphan, or Chuan, was symbolized by a star. And in Acts 7:43, it says, in the verse that, "Yea, you took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphan, figures which you have made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon." Because Babylon was a place in time where there was a lot of pagan religions and idolatry and sexual immorality going on in Babylon. That's why Babylon is mentioned in Revelations as Mystery Babylon and the Great Whore. And Amos, same thing, talks about Chuan, or Remphan, and the images and the star of your God, which the Israelites made. And because of this, he caused them to go into captivity. And they went through all the curses that seemed to parallel what African Americans or Africans and black people went through for centuries and over a millennia. So different, as we talked about different people before, occultists and magicians all wrote books acknowledging this about Saturn worship. And as we talked about before, the 10 spears, or the Sephiroth of the Kabbalah Tree of Life, were according to 10 divine archangels, which is you won't find in our Bible, but you might find it in the book of Enoch. And interesting, if you look at the top here, under Kether, you will see the name Metatron. Metatron holds the crown. The crown's at the top position. And we see at the bottom, we see Gabriel and we see Michael. And this is very important, and we'll talk about it in a second. And the hexagram, again, was the 6-pointed star, which was ancient Remphan, also known as Chuan, also was known as Moloch, and was another representation of Nimrod, husband of Semiramis, the queen of Babylon. Now, the symbol was not Jewish, like we said before, and the Rothschilds, who also were involved in the Knights of Malta, put it on the flag of Israel, and turned it blue when it was originally red, when it was under the Rothschild or Red Shield back in the day. And they had some opposition from the Jewish people about this symbol, but nevertheless, the Rothschild had a lot of money, a lot of power, and therefore that became the symbol for Israel. And on two sides of the talisman, the first face is engraved in pentagram. It's a pentagram, and then it's a star with 5 points. And the other side is engraved the bull's head, enclosed in a 6-pointed star, surrounded by the letters composing the name of Rempha, the planetary genius of Saturn, according to the alphabet of the Magi. And they have different talismans that you can use, like the talisman of Mars, the talisman of Venus, the talisman of Uranus, and different planets. It's just all types of different talisman. And back in those days, King Solomon was supposedly has said to use this this ancient mysticism and magic, along with a ring to invoke demons and control them back in the day. And anybody, if you talk to anybody in the occult world, they will all verify with you. And supposedly, with this talisman, you could invoke 72 demons. And the 72 demons you could control, and each one of these demons will give you certain things like intelligence and power and intellectual abilities and wealth and sexual desires and whatnot. And they said that Solomon had learned how to master this with the hexagram and the pentagram in the circle with the talisman and a special ring that was made out of bronze and iron. Now, the Chaldean number for Saturn is 666, suggesting the mark of Cain, who was a prototype of the mark of the beast. And back then they worshipped the god Saturn. And a lot of Jewish sources also say that the mark of Cain was the seal of Solomon or the Star of David. And if you see right here, you can see where the 666 come from. And if you look at the root of the name Saturn in Chaldee, which is associated with Chaldeans, is originally pronounced Satur, but Chaldean scholars know that Satur only consists of 4 letters, Stur or Stor, which is almost similar to star. And if you add up the numerical values of Stur, meaning star, you get 666. And here we talks more about the seal of Solomon. Now, moving forward, the different gods, throughout times, you have Baal, the Canaanite Phoenician god, and you have Osiris, the Egyptian god of the underworld and the dead, seen here with the green face, and you have Tammuz. Tammuz was supposed to be the son of Semiramis. Semiramis is also associated with Nimrod and reincarnated, and Tammuz was also a false Christ. Baal was worshipped as if he was a high god, and so was Osiris. And here we see Isis with her child Horus, who later became known as the Eye of Ra, the Eye of Horus. And here we see again Semiramis and Tammuz in the same position, just like the Virgin Mary and Jesus. Now, getting back to the Kabbalah Tree of Life and Metatron, Horus, and the all-seeing eye of Satan, in the Zohar is a holy book of the mystical branch of Judaism. And the angel named Metatron, which we saw at the top part of the Judaism Tree of Life, was an archangel, according to Judaism practices, who was Enoch, the biblical character Enoch, in human form before being taken up to heaven, because we all know that Enoch was taken up to heaven. He walked with God for 300 years, and then he was no more. And Enoch was like the great-grandfather of Noah, or the grandfather of Noah. But there are also reports that say that Metatron was the one that blasphemed God by saying that he was the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And it's also known as the Lesser Yahweh, and Yahweh was used as the name of God in the Old Testament. In the Kabbalah, Metatron was connected to Kether, as we saw earlier, whose secret name is Aya. And Aya in Hebrew means I am, short for the name of God that was given to Moses when he told Moses that I am that I am, or I am what I am, or I will be what I will be. And Metatron, almost similar to Megatron and Transformers, supposedly oversees Kether. Kether means the crown. Crown is at the top. Kether was situated at the top of the Kabbalah Tree of Life, as we saw earlier. And as we talked about earlier, Aya Asha'ir meant, the holy name of God, I am that I am. But in Judaism, this name is linked to the malevolent Metatron / Kether, who stands alone with the crown at the top position in Judaism. However, Metatron and his seal are always linked with the satanic demonic world, and is one of the same as the Egyptian god Horus, or Haru. And the name Metatron, like I said, some of the Megatron Transformers both share the same storyline of being evil, with a desire to destroy mankind. And as you remember in the Bible, Satan wants to be the Most High. He wants to be worshipped as the Most High. So he may appear as the angel of light. And, of course, Lucifer means the son of the morning dawn. And, you have the Illuminati, the enlightened ones. And so we have this emphasis on light. So in Rolling Stone, they did a interview. They interviewed Carlos Santana. This is like back in 2000, and Carlos Santana admitted and talked about Metatron, Megatron. They talked about Metatron. So they said that Metatron in this article was an angel, and they described him as an angel, and they said that Carlos Santana was in regular contact with Metatron since 1994. Now they said that in the magazine that Carlos Santana would sit facing the wall with candles lit, and he had a yellow legal pad on one side, ready for the communication that will come. And they said, people were saying it was kind of like a fax machine. And so, and this has also been, talked about in another book. This guy named Roger Moreau, and he wrote a book called A Trip into the Supernatural, and he kind of discussed the same things. How when he got into Satan worship and Satanism, they told him that Satan and his demonic forces would, help write books and help write lyrics for people. And he went to a room and he heard a typewriter typing, and he opened the door, and the typewriter was typing by itself and typing out books that were being published and becoming bestsellers, and also was typing out lyrics and everything else for musicians back in those days. And this guy was blown away. This guy named Roger Moreau, Mr. Moreau, and the author of the book Trip to the Supernatural. And he eventually got out of Satanism and almost lost his life getting out of it to convert back to Christianity, because he had seen what was going on, and he had almost went in too deep to not get out. So in the Rolling Stone, they talk more about Metatron, and they describe Metatron as the architect of physical life. And because of him, it says that we can French kiss, we can hug, and we can get a hot dog, wiggle our toes. And he saw Metatron in his dreams and meditations, and he was described him to look a little bit like Santa Claus with a white beard and a jolly old fellow. And Metatron, who has been mentioned in mystical disciplines through the ages, also appears as the eye inside the triangle. And these are the words of what was going on with Carlos Santana in the cover story, The Epic Life of Carlos Santana, in Rolling Stone, March 16, 2000. And so in it, they also talked about when you meditate, and you got the candles, you got incense, and you've been chanting, and all of a sudden you hear a voice saying, "Write this down." And this is the voice of Metatron. But of course, in the Bible, the Lord said in Leviticus to stay away from familiar spirits, which are known as demons. Leviticus 19:13, it says, "Regard not them that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. I am the Lord thy God." Also in 20 verse 6. So the seal of Metatron, and Metatron was described by Santana as the eye inside the triangle. And the seal of Metatron, if you research it, is a triangle inside of a circle, similar to what's in Catholic Church synagogues, with the circle and the triangle inside of it, with the 4-letter tetragrammaton symbols for the Judaism supposed name of God that they came up with. And the triangle inside the circle with the all-seeing eye represented Horus, Heru, Lucifer, or Satan, watching the world from another dimension. Now the eye inside the triangle, shows the allegiance to Christ rejectors, God haters, and Satan worshippers. The triangle inside of a circle with the eye is also seen in Freemasonry, the Jesuits order, the Catholic Church, the Rosicrucians, the Illuminati, and Judaism. And it was also used by Satan worshippers, Aleister Crowley. He's also a Freemason, a Jesuit, and a Rosicrucian. It also was used by the founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, and he was an Ashkenazi Jew. Also, he used this circle triangle symbol and described it as the most powerful symbol of Satan. The triangle, often used to conjure up demons. And so, like his, co-person in the same religion, Aleister Crowley, back in those days was nicknamed the wickedest man alive. And he's also nicknamed the Beast, and he promoted the triangle and the all-seeing eye in his book, which was called the Book of the Law. And in the triangle, in it, the triangle represented, like I said, the most significant symbol of Satan and the guiding light of the new age of Horus to come under the Antichrist. And in Exodus